But right now, another big story we are covering. Saudi Arabia says a major power play by the country's crown prince is an effort to crack down on corruption. Mohammed bin Salman ordered the arrest of dozens of powerful princes, ministers, and investors. Some are his rivals in the royal family. A billionaire investor with major stakes in American companies was also taken into custody. Time magazine once declared Prince Alawid bin Talal the Warren Buffett of Arabia. Margaret Brennan is traveling with the president in Tokyo. Margaret, good morning.
Good morning. Well, it was a political earthquake in Saudi Arabia, a place where change is often slow moving. Yet in a single weekend, the crown prince removed some of the country's most influential figures as he dramatically reshapes that kingdom. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman vowed to hold accountable the kingdom's most powerful. He ordered the detention of influential royals, including one of the world's richest men, investor Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. The economy minister was also dismissed, as well as the head of the National Guard, who led one of the few security service branches not already under the crown prince's control.
Why connect the anti-corruption campaign, if that's what it is, to the removal of the commander of the National Guard?
Thomas Lippman is with the Middle East Institute.
I think this is designed to send a message, which they've been sending louder and louder for the past several months, that you will get with the program and one man is in charge.
The actions consolidate power into the hands of 32-year-old Mohammed bin Salman, who is next in line to the Saudi throne. He has been praised by the Trump administration for his efforts to modernize the kingdom. As the purge was underway, the White House remained silent and refused to say whether Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, had discussed it during a recent visit. While flying to Asia, President Trump spoke with the Crown Prince's father, King Salman. He said he pitched a financial transaction valued at several $100 billion, urging him to take Saudi oil giant Aramco public in the U.S. on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. They also discussed another extraordinary event that coincided with the arrest.
That was a very rapidly moving missile shot out of the sky. That was a needle in the sky.
A close call with a missile shot toward Riyadh Airport, launched from neighboring war-torn Yemen. Both the president and Saudi authorities have blamed Iran for giving those missiles to rebels in Yemen. Of course, it was the Saudi crown prince who began that military campaign in Yemen, and the president has given his unwavering support despite mass casualties there. Gail?
Boy, thank you very much, Margaret. I've heard this described as a Game of Thrones move. Is it? See, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I haven't seen it yet. I know.
Well, I don't think it's quite like that. I think he's just consolidating power. I mean, as the crown prince, and but there's reports that the Ritz-Carlton there in Riyadh is essentially holding many of these
within the
princes.
diplomatic community.
Yeah,
that's where it is. It's look at what happened in China.
Yes,
is a better guide.
Yeah, well, to be continued for sure.
Yeah, Eric, a surprising move indeed. It's being carried out under the pretext of fighting corruption, as you said. That's the official line coming out from Riyadh, at least officially, but there's a lot of skepticism about what's actually happening right now in Saudi Arabia. In the last few months, the crown prince, the now crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, has consolidated power and pushed out several other leading candidates for the Saudi throne. The 32-year-old bin Salman has made public statements about not only fighting terrorism, but also modernizing Saudi Arabia and tackling corruption. And the Trump administration counts him as a valuable ally, but he's most known for pursuing an aggressive foreign policy that includes Saudi's war in Yemen, a blockade of U.S. ally and Saudi rival Qatar, and intensifying the regional conflict with Iran. Now, among those princes, military officers and top officials that were arrested in the last 24 hours, Prince Walid bin Talal. He's one of the world's richest men, a major investor in Citibank, Twitter, and the parent company of Fox News, 21st Century Fox. He's also somebody who has publicly feuded with President Trump, and President Trump has accused him of trying to buy U.S. politicians. Now, in typical fashion, Saudi fashion, Eric, the men have not been taken to a prison, according to reports coming out of Saudi Arabia. Those that have been arrested have been taken to the Ritz-Carlton and are under house arrest there, Eric.
House arrest at the Ritz-Carlton. Haven't heard that ever before. All right, Connor, thank you.
It's a shakeup sending shockwaves across the kingdom and the world. Saudi Arabia detaining top officials in a sweeping corruption probe. Among them, one of the world's richest men, billionaire investor Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, recently interviewed by CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
He has been the singular face of business and finance and relationships between Saudi Arabia and the rest of the world.
Known for his Twitter feuds with then-candidate Trump and purchases of large stakes in companies like Apple, Twitter, Citigroup, and News Corp. Some of the detainees reportedly held here, Riyadh's glamorous Ritz-Carlton. The arrests came just hours after the Saudi ruler, King Salman, created an anti-corruption committee led by his son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
The stated goal is to root out corruption. There are others who are whispering about whether this is really about a consolidation of power.
The ambitious young prince, next in line to the throne, has been growing increasingly powerful, launching economic and social reforms aimed at modernizing the kingdom. Saudi Arabia tonight, a nation in flux. Lucy Kafanov, NBC News, London.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
King Salman, with his young crown prince, a 32-year-old leader, pushing against this anti-corruption drive. It did raise some eyebrows because on the same weekend they introduced the anti-corruption committee. He came down like a hammer against some prominent business people. The Attorney General of Saudi Arabia, in a statement, making it very clear that the actions taken by the government are equal to the crimes that have been taken here. So they want to make it very clear this is not just revenge by the Crown Prince or King Salman. I spoke to a senior advisor to the Crown Prince in the last hour who said, look, John, this is consistency across the board. A Vision 2030 plan, an effort to modernize the economy and the people, the Women to Drive in June 2018, something, Becky, that you covered. That's a signal. The third leg of this, of course, is corruption. And yes, I think we could add a twist here to consolidate power. This is a tribal society, and the Crown Prince and, of course, the King, who's over 80 years old, wanting to consolidate the power here and make sure his Crown Prince in this reform effort has his support.
Saudi sweep. At least 11 princes, including prominent billionaire investor Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, are now under arrest in Saudi Arabia. The arrests were carried out by the powerful new anti-corruption committee headed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the future king. Prince Al-Walid is one of the world's richest men, we know. He has investments in companies including Twitter, Citigroup, and 21st Century Fox, the parent company of Fox Business Network. In the wake of Prince Al-Walid's arrest, Kingdom Holdings is assuring shareholders this morning that the kingdom has confidence in the company, writing in part this: I am not surprised by the government's vote of confidence as KHC, that's Kingdom Holding Company, pursues its investment strategy in global business operations. I would also like to emphasize that KHC's experienced and seasoned team of senior executives who are leaders in their respective fields are focused on their unwavering responsibilities to KHC shareholders and stakeholders. Obviously, they are trying to calm investors across the world down after seeing the chairman of KHC, Prince Al-Walid, get arrested. Joining us now, Fox News senior judicial analyst Andrew Napolitano. Judge, this move was shocking. It's not illegal under Saudi law, though, right?
Well, no, it's not illegal. But remember, Saudi law is not law like we have here. It's not based on first principles. It's based on whatever the person in power wants. It's a kingdom. It's a one-man rule. It's a tyrannical form of government. We have many financial relationships with them and many amicable relationships with them, but they do not share the rule of law that we do, which has basic principles of due process. So if the prince in charge decides you're going to be arrested, you're going to be arrested. Now, what's going to happen to him, the billionaire investor whom I have met, whom many of us have met from the time that he was on the board of News Corp, is anybody's guess. Yeah. But don't expect a fair jury trial like we get here. We were able to go to the Prince Al-Walid's resort while I was in Saudi Arabia 2 weeks ago. And I was able to speak with the Crown Prince, the future king, about his vision. And, you know, I think one thing that's interesting here is that the Crown Prince, 32 years old, young guy trying to change the mentality of Saudi Arabia, he sees the U.S. as an incredible ally because they see a common enemy in Iran. Well, some of the people he arrested are people of privilege who complained about his liberalization. You know, it was a big deal a couple of weeks ago when the Saudis announced that, I'm pointing at you for a reason, women can drive cars. I mean, over here, we laugh at it, but it's a major step there.
Right.
There was a lot of pushback to that, pushback against him, pushback by some of the people that were arrested.
A lot of people feel that he's moving too fast.
Yes.
And then so I asked him about that when I interviewed the future king. Here's what Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told me.
Saudi Arabia was not like this prior to 79. Saudi Arabia and in the entire region, you have the awakening project spread after 79 for many reasons. Today is not the right day to discuss them. We were not like this in the past. We only want to go back to what we were, the moderate Islam that is open to the world, open to all the religions.
That's what he's referring to, the Khomeini rule in 1979. He says, look, we want to live normal lives, the way we were living lives before 1979.
That is a very profound statement. And even though I saw much of your interview, I didn't see that part, but that is absolutely profound. Look, we don't know where this is going to go. The President of the United States hasn't weighed in on it yet. We have he has.
Yeah, he weighed in. He said that he agrees with the Crown Prince's modernization this weekend, he said.
Wow. Well, I'm not surprised that he said that, and I'm glad that he said it. I'd like to see some due process for these people, but I don't expect it.
Yeah, Judge, you know, you talk about this Crown Prince looking to liberalize and move more towards this, Western ways in some ways, allowing women to drive, cracking down on corruption. But now we have these prominent people under arrest, and if a man like Prince Al-Walid is treated poorly, and God forbid, something bad happens, we've seen this helicopter crash, which looks very suspicious, of some very prominent folks, including the son of the former Crown Prince Moukhrine. How important is it for MBS to manage this properly?
Well, do you use tyrannical means to lessen tyranny? And that's what we may very well be confronted with here. The future king, on his own, there's no grand jury, there's no investigation, there's no evidence. I want these 10 people gone because it will make the country more moderate and more liberal and more Western. And I'm going to use these means to accomplish it. It's got to play out. It's only 3 days in the making.
They're saying that, any gain or investment that was deemed to have been ill-gotten because of corruption or money laundering, that will be seized by government. So you just don't know what that includes.
Well, you don't know where that's going to go.
It could be anything. It's
many billions, or if you're talking just a token amount.
An anti-corruption crackdown in Saudi Arabia this weekend targeted some of the country's most powerful princes and businessmen. They include rivals of the heir to the throne, the Crown Prince. Here's Jonathan Vigliotti.
يعفى صاحب السمو الملكي. The arrests were announced on state-run television and featured some of the country's most powerful. Among them, billionaire investor Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who owns or has owned major stakes in American companies like Citigroup, Apple, and Twitter. One of the world's richest men, he's also outspoken, once getting into a 2015 Twitter argument with then presidential candidate Donald Trump. "You are a disgrace, not only to the GOP, but to all America. You will never win," he wrongly predicted. Trump fired back, tweeting, "That dopey prince wants to control our U.S. politicians with daddy's money." The origin of that wealth, along with the fortunes of at least 10 other princes, are now under investigation, headed by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the 32-year-old son and top advisor of King Salman. Both father and son greeted President Trump during his first foreign policy trip last May. While this crackdown has been applauded by some as cleaning up house, others say it's the young prince's bold move to consolidate power. The fate of the detained royals and their assets are unclear, reportedly taken to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, where they're under house arrest. Jonathan Vigliotti, CBS News, London.
For more on the Saudi purge, I'm joined here in the studio by Gary Sick, who served on the National Security Councils under Presidents Ford, Carter, and Reagan. He's now a senior research scholar at Columbia University's Middle East Institute and an adjunct professor at the School of International and Public Affairs. So why do this purge?
That's the big question. They say it's all about corruption. I really don't believe that. Tucked in among those people who were arrested were the head of the National Guard, which is the one remaining military group that wasn't under the control of the Crown Prince already. And I think this provided excellent cover to get him and get him out of the way. They arrested just a couple weeks ago, or about 10 days ago, a huge number of clerics and liberal-minded reformers who were in many ways critical in one form or another of the Crown Prince. It looks very much as if they're clearing the ground here for a takeover so that the young prince is going to become the king. So basically, we've got a different kind of Saudi Arabia than we had before, and this has real effects on the stability of the region.
Speaking of stability, one of those that were caught up in this is a global investor who's got his fingers in lots of places. What does that do to not just those companies, but different markets, seeing where Saudi Arabia is putting its money?
The Saudi leadership announced today that they were that this wouldn't have any impact on the holdings and basically the continuity of all of these companies. But you know, with the investor, your key investor, in very nice, house arrest in a fancy hotel in Riyadh, you have to wonder about the state of the company and what happens to all of those shares, and what about his voting rights and so forth.
Sure. It's kind of two questions here. What's sort of the direction of Saudi Arabia, in the sense that just in the last few months we've seen incremental movements that women are going to get the right to drive. They're going to get the right to go to soccer stadiums as of next year. And then on the other hand, we are engaged in a military conflict in Yemen as a coalition partner with them as well, while all of this consolidation of power happens.
Well, this is the unanswered question, because once the young prince came in, he immediately launched an invasion of Yemen, which even people who are only vaguely aware of the situation in the Arabian Peninsula could have told him is a losing proposition, and it's turned into a quagmire. He's pouring money into the thing, and it's not getting any place. Then, just not very long ago, he launched a siege of Qatar, in which he cut off one of the countries that is a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which we've always relied on for military stability in the region. And that looks as if it's not going to be resolved in any time soon. And then he, just on the same day that this announcement of the palace purge took place, Saudi Arabia intervened in the politics of Lebanon, got rid of the prime minister there, and it looks as if that could have long-term implications that could lead to an internal breakdown of civil war, or even a war between Israel and Hezbollah. So they're really involved in upsetting the status quo throughout the region. And, the United States, to a considerable degree, is complicit in this, because the relationship that President Trump has created with the new Crown Prince, which is very, very strong, puts us as a part of this thing.
All right, a lot to watch. Gary Sick of Columbia University, thanks so much.
Okay, good to talk to you.
Remarkable times in Saudi Arabia, the hugely influential Sunni Muslim kingdom. There's been an unprecedented anti-corruption purge with sweeping arrests of senior politicians and business leaders and members of the royal family. And a Saudi prince and 7 other officials have been killed in a helicopter crash near the country's border with Yemen, where Saudi Arabia is involved in a bitter civil war. Well, to help us understand all of this, our security correspondent Frank Gardner joins us. Frank, what a weekend for the kingdom. Let's just talk about these purges first. Mohammed bin Salman is seen, as a modernizer. So just tell us what all this means.
These are incredible times in Saudi Arabia. There's never been anything quite like it. And in some ways, it's very exciting. His supporters are saying this is the man who's going to lead us to the future, who's setting the stage for a modern economy, a modern society, and jobs for all the millions of Saudis who are pouring out of schools and universities. Others, though, especially the older guard, are extremely worried by these changes that are happening very fast by Saudi standards. This is a country unused to sudden change, and he is certainly amassing enemies amongst those older guard people. What happened at the weekend is that 11 senior princes, including Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, were detained. They're not being thrown into some dark dungeon. They are reportedly staying in great comfort at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel or another similar place. But the fact that these very high-profile establishment figures have been removed, and very importantly, the head of the National Guard, Prince Mit'ab bin Abdullah, has been relieved of his command. That removes, at a stroke, the final obstacle to the Crown Prince having total control over the country. Now, nominally, it's his father, King Salman, who's doing this. He's the king, but he's 82. And everybody in Saudi sees this as the hand of the very ambitious, dynamic and controversial Crown Prince, who's only 32, with very little experience.
It's extraordinary. We're just getting in the last few minutes the Attorney General of Saudi Arabia saying that this is just phase one.
Indeed, implying that there's more to come. Now, the idea that these people are really the sort of spearhead of corruption in Saudi Arabia, I think is a little bit hard to swallow, because the way business has been done by them is the way business has been done by many, many people in Saudi Arabia at all levels for a very long time. It was ever thus. The arms deals in Saudi Arabia were always done in the past in the form of kickbacks. In other words, you're the buyer, I'm the seller, and I pay rather more than the inflated price. You take the difference. That's what used to happen in the past. I can't say if it's still happening today, but certainly it's a very opaque, it's a very untransparent economy. Now, one of the things that Saudis, I think, would like to see is transparency in their own government in terms of the oil income. You never see an issued set of accounts for that. So if they're really going to root out corruption, let's have transparency in government. That would be a shocking change.
Oh, fascinating times in the kingdom. Frank, as ever, thanks so much for joining us.
He may not be formally king, but the Saudi's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has already tightened his grip on the Saudi kingdom through a corruption crackdown that has led to the detention of 11 princes, 4 ministers and a dozen former ministers, and now the freezing of all their bank accounts. Among those arrested is the billionaire Al-Walid bin Talal, who is one of Saudi Arabia's most known business tycoons. He has invested in top firms such as Citibank and Twitter. The anti-corruption purge also led to the detention of the head of the National Guard, Prince Mutib bin Abdullah. Other detainees include former Finance Minister Ibrahim Al-Assaf, a board member of national oil giant the Saudi Aramco, the ousted Economy Minister Abdel Fakir, the former Riyadh Governor Prince Turki bin Abdullah, and Khalid Al-Tuwajihiri, who headed the royal court under the late King Abdullah. The crackdown was carried out by the newly formed Anti-Corruption Commission headed by the Royal Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In May this year, the Royal Prince had told the media that Saudi Arabia was growing apprehensive of corruption cases and anyone who is guilty would have been punished whether he was a prince or a minister.
ونظرا لما لاحظناه ولمسناه من استغلال من قبل بعض ضعاف النفوس الذين غلبوا مصالحهم الخاصة على المصلحة العامة واعتدوا على المال العام دون وازع من دين أو ضمير أو أخلاق أو وطنية، مستغلين نفوذهم والسلطة التي ائتمنوا عليها في التطاول على المال العام وإساءة استخدامه واختلاسه.
US President Donald Trump has praised the so-called anti-corruption purge by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. A number of royals, ministers and investors were arrested on Sunday in an anti-corruption drive ordered by Saudi's future king Mohammed bin Salman. Donald Trump, who has cultivated much warmer ties with Riyadh than his predecessor Barack Obama, tweeted that he has, and I'm quoting here, great confidence in King Salman and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, unquote. Among those arrested were billionaire investor Al-Walid bin Talal, who is one of the kingdom's most prominent businessmen. The purge is the latest in a series of dramatic steps taken by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to assert Saudi influence internationally and amass more power for himself at home. Meanwhile, Saudi government has issued a statement about the anti-corruption drive and the detention. It said, and I'm quoting from that, "The detentions are merely the start of a vital process to root out corruption wherever it exists," unquote.
Global investors flocked to Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel to hear Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sell his dream of a new $500 billion megacity in the Saudi kingdom. Mobile phone footage shows how the hotel is now being used as a holding pen for dozens of arrested royal family members and businessmen. Among those arrested is one of the world's richest men, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. He owns London's famous Savoy Hotel and is a major shareholder in giants like Twitter, Apple and Citigroup. His arrest will likely spook business partners in the West,
who saw him as somebody that they had done their due diligence on and who they could safely do business with. So this will lead many to wonder, are their Saudi partners safe?
In 2010, British defence firm BAE Systems pleaded guilty in a US court to false accounting on a fighter jet contract with Saudi Arabia worth tens of billions of dollars, a deal known as Al Yamama. But a probe by Britain's Serious Fraud Office was quashed under political pressure from London and Riyadh.
Will old big corruption cases like the Al Yamama case, for example, be reopened and cause embarrassment to prominent Western companies?
The former head of the National Guard, Prince Miteb bin Abdullah, was also arrested and dismissed from his post, part of the Crown Prince's efforts to consolidate power, say analysts.
Mohammed bin Salman has brought first the Defense Ministry, then lately the Counterterrorism and Domestic Intelligence Services under his oversight, and the National Guard was kind of the one force remaining outside of that.
The Crown Prince is pushing economic and social reforms under the so-called 2030 vision. Low oil prices have driven a predicted 2017 budget deficit of $52 billion, around 8% of GDP.
Economic growth is very weak, and there is a change in the economy of the kingdom, from being an oil economy into an investing economy. And some of the main principles of the investing economy are transparency, clarity, good governance, and countering corruption.
US President Donald Trump has praised the corruption crackdown on Twitter.
It appears that he has really bought into Mohammed bin Salman as somebody who is business focused, who is against extremism, and who will lift Saudi Arabia into a more modern world. But yes, of course, there will be many concerns within the US Foreign Service and the military about the unpredictability that exists currently.
Unpredictability that is engulfing the region. Sunni-led Saudi Arabia remains at war with Shiite Houthi rebels in Yemen, who fired a ballistic missile that nearly reached Riyadh airport Saturday. Meanwhile, it's unclear whether the United States will continue to support the Iran nuclear deal. Analysts fear instability in both Tehran and Riyadh could exacerbate their long-standing rivalry. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Early in November, dozens of Saudi Arabia's richest men, including members of the royal family, were swept up and detained in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton hotel. It's been called an anti-corruption drive, but opposition sources have claimed inmates were being tortured and required to sign over their fortunes in order to be released. Those facing interrogation included Prince Walid bin Talal, whose estimated $18 billion fortune, with stakes in Euro Disney and high-profile Western tech companies, makes him Saudi Arabia's richest businessman. But his wealth and family connections have also made him a rival to Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince and architect of the anti-corruption drive. On Monday, the Arab Digest website reported that Canadian-based businessman Alan Bender, seen here to the right of Walid bin Talal, had been flown to the kingdom as it built a case against Prince Walid. Mr. Bender was taken to a site near the hotel. BBC Newsnight managed to locate Mr. Bender in Toronto. He was able to confirm his trip to Riyadh in December and that he'd spoken via video conference while there with the detained prince.
He was brought in through the teleconference and was sat down. We were looking at each other face to face.
Did he look as if he was in some way being ill-treated, or was he just shocked to see you? How would you describe his appearance?
I would say he looked. He didn't look comfortable. He wasn't. He was unshaven. He didn't look in his best condition at all. He looked tired. A lot of twitching during the conversation while I was reading the script out to him.
The Saudi authorities had prepared a script of allegations for Mr. Bender to read out to Walid bin Talal via video teleconference link.
I would say my presence was to be used as probably evidence of details that they needed to confront him, because I'm probably the only person who was involved in personal and direct negotiations with him related to a very personal matter.
Those very personal matters related to Waleed's separation from a former long-term partner who Mr. Bender represented in settlement negotiations. The Saudi authorities, it seems, want to use this to pressure Waleed to sign over his foreign wealth.
These two know each other very well, and the Saudis flew in Alan Bender and other old business adversaries of Waleed to try and put pressure on him, to try and crack him and make him do what Mohammed bin Salman wants, which is hand over all his foreign assets and make videotaped confessions admitting to all his guilt and swearing allegiance.
The Saudis have announced that the Ritz-Carlton will soon revert to its normal role as a hotel. But there's evidence that some key detainees, including Prince Waleed, had been transferred to detention elsewhere, even in December.
It looked more like, I would say, a detention room or something related to a jail cell. Even the sounds of the doors sliding back and forth. It didn't look or sound like he was at the Ritz-Carlton.
Alan Bender's account is a singular one, and the Saudi authorities have not yet responded to our request for comment. But it gives a good idea of the lengths the kingdom's rulers are willing to go to humble a prince who was their most successful businessman. Mark Urban, BBC News.
We drive in under police escort, just past midnight. No one enters here now without official permission. The world's most talked about hotel. Riyadh's most palatial, most prestigious. Now a gilded prison. I'm taken in by Saudi officials, told don't film faces, don't record conversations. Here in the early hours of the morning, there's still people in the lobby drinking coffee, as you'd find in any of the five-star hotels here in the capital. Most of the people who have now been forced to stay here are keeping to themselves, trying to limit any further damage to their reputation. Their mobile phones have been taken away from them, but there is a hotline that's available to them. They can call their lawyers, family members, even leading members of the companies they're still trying to keep running. The world's most pampered prisoners have every comfort except freedom. The state is picking up this bill. As far as detention centres go, this one is beyond compare. Luxury swimming pool, restaurants, a gym, everything is glittering. There's even a bowling alley, but most prisoners just stay in their rooms. I'm taken to meet one suspect. He doesn't give me his name. Says he spends his time with his lawyer, focusing on his case. I'm told not to ask about it. But I get a briefing. Senior officials conducting this crackdown say it's not a formal investigation yet. They call it a friendly process, but it's clearly fraught. We're being told that when people were brought here around midnight on November the 4th, they were understandably angry. Some of them thought this would just be a show and it wouldn't last. And then when they realized they were here to stay, they were furious. Almost everyone here, 95% I was told, are willing to make a deal, to give back what are said to be substantial sums of money in order to get out of here. The Crown Prince, 32 years old, is taking on fellow princes, senior ministers, some of the biggest billionaires, tackling corruption, concentrating power. Weeks on, many are still asking questions about why this purge happened here and now. Outside this gilded prison, it certainly has gone down well. Many Saudis welcome an end to the rampant corruption in the kingdom. But there are risks too. The ambitious Crown Prince risks creating enemies and uncertainty, which could endanger the very stability and reforms, his kingdom so badly needs. The Crown Prince hopes everyone will be checking out by the end of this year. The longer this ordeal drags on, the more questions will be asked here and abroad about what's going on inside. Lise Doucette, BBC News, at the Ritz-Carlton, Riyadh.
has surprised many of Saudi Arabia's allies, and it has also spooked global investors. We'll talk a bit more about that. I'm joined by author and journalist Bashir El-Khoury. Thank you for being with us on France 24 tonight. It is no secret, is it, that corruption is a major problem in Saudi Arabia. Is this a welcome move by MBS, as he's become known, or is it, as one prominent Saudi journalist put it, a selective justice?
Well, corruption is definitely a problem in Saudi Arabia, like in many other Arab countries. But let me say that under the pretext of fighting corruption, the Crown Prince clearly seeks to remove from the circle of power any Saudi official or even Sunni ally of Riyadh in another Arab country who does not fully adhere to his domestic or foreign policy, be it the criticism of religious fundamentalism, the alliance with the United States, the hardening of ties with Qatar and Iran, or the war in Yemen and the economic reforms plan. So this explains, at least partially, the choice of certain personalities arrested last weekend, like the Lebanese Saudi billionaire Al-Walid bin Talal, who is publicly hostile to the American President Donald Trump, or the CEO of the Bin Laden Group, which actually controls most of the construction projects in the country, along with Saudi Oje, owned by Hariri family, and that was actually forced to shut down, or indirectly forced to shut down last summer. So the privileges previously held by these two companies go against the economic reform plan of Mohammed bin Salman, which will imply a greater recourse to public-private partnerships, and hence to the entry of several actors in the construction sector.
But is it necessary for him to consolidate power like this? Because the Saudi economy does need to diversify, doesn't it? The oil wealth will not last forever.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is exactly what the Crown Prince wants to do. His plan is actually to change the economic system by initiating a transition to what we call a post-oil economy in a country where 90% of government revenues and 87% of exports depend on oil. And what you should know is that because of this dependency and consequent volatility, the public deficit amounted to $97 billion in 2015, then to $79 billion in 2016, while the growth rate dropped to 1.4% in 2016 compared to 10% in 2011, and should not exceed 0.4% at the end of this year. So for the moment, I think that Mohammed bin Salman is trying to strengthen his political power in the country, and by doing so, to actually accelerate or strengthen the implementation of his economic plan, including diversification and this transition from to a post-oil economy.
All right, let's leave the economy aside for a moment. What about Saudi society? He has been described as a great reformer. Obviously, earlier this year we saw that Saudi women were permitted to drive cars. Is that a title he deserves? Is he a moderator? Is he a reformer?
Well, what can be said about Mohammed bin Salman is concerning this issue particularly, is that he is definitely a young prince. He's only 32 years old, and he would like to see his country move forward. He wants to modernize his country, but at the same time, what is a bit, it is a kind of paradox, is the way he's doing things. In last September, many people, intellectuals, some opponents to the policy policy of the kingdom were arrested. And last weekend, we saw what happened also with the arrest of more than 11 princes, 4 ministers in office. So there is no doubt that this behavior is typical of an authoritarian politician. And it contrasts with the rights given to women. Maybe Mohammed bin Salman objective is to be a great authoritarian modernizer, who would be putting the traditional Saudi system and the leader of Saudi voluntarism against Iran on a geopolitical level. But this is absolutely not a move towards more democracy and respect for human rights in the country. This way of doing things does not announce on a political level a transition towards more freedom in the country. That's sure.
Bashir Al-Khoury, thank you very much indeed. Now, at least
Saudi Arabia's Attorney General has said a great deal of evidence has already been gathered in the biggest anti-corruption crackdown on the country's powerful and wealthy in its modern history. 32-year-old Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has led a purge, resulting in the detention of dozens of politicians, businessmen and a number of senior princes, including billionaire Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. One official told Reuters it was just phase 1 of the clampdown.
لا شك شوف بأن عمل البرج في جدة.
Saudi stocks wavered after the arrests, but then recovered as the move was seen as strengthening the Crown Prince's authority and his ability to implement economic reforms.
This is really about Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, solidifying his power base and at the same time taking out corruption as well. He's showing that no one is above the law, be they billionaire investors, members of the royal family, or even government ministers. This is something, of course, that fits in with his economic agenda here in Saudi Arabia. He's been moving at record speed, taking on the religious establishment, taking on conservatives who say that women shouldn't be allowed to drive. He's also, of course, been really allowing young people, half of the population here, of course, under the age of 25, a real hope for the future. And the bigger question, of course, is whether or not these actions over the last 24 hours are going to scare away foreign investment that the Crown Prince knows he needs to change this country's economy.
Let's take a closer look now at the casualties of the new Saudi Anti-Corruption Committee. It was created to deal with the abuse of power, including the theft of public funds. 11 princes and dozens of former ministers are among those reportedly detained. And then there are those who've been dismissed. First to be removed on King Salman's royal orders was the Minister of the National Guard, Prince Meteb bin Abdullah. He's the son of the late King Abdullah, making him one of the most prominent princes on the list. He was the last senior royal in government not closely connected with Salman or his son and heir to the throne, Mohammed bin Salman. Also out is the Minister of Economy and Planning, Adil bin Muhammad Fakih, an engineer and the former mayor of Jeddah. And another to go is Abdullah bin Sultan. He was the commander of the Saudi Navy. But by this royal decree, he's been ordered to retire. Al Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bishara says the heir to the throne, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is flexing his political muscle in ways not seen before in recent Saudi history.
It's yet another reshuffle, right, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And at the heart of it is the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's clearly the man with power in hands, being able to change things around within the kingdom, and not only changing people, but changing policies, changing direction, and taking on these major, mega, hundreds of billions of dollars projects like a new city, like privatizing a bit of Aramco, the main oil company in Saudi Arabia. So all in all, he's taken a very aggressive stance that we haven't seen before in the modern history of Saudi Arabia, where a new king or a new regime comes in, not only changes cabinet, not only changes a bit of the structure so that it is a new era of a new king, But now we have the king and the crown prince really changing decades, centuries-long tradition within the kingdom. So the latest reshuffle today is really a part of a longer change, dramatic change in the kingdom, where the new crown prince, young, inexperienced, certainly in government, and he's been called ambitious as well as reckless by the various outlets in the West that are really close to Saudi Arabia.
Well, you've been talking to, many analysts ever since he was appointed, both in and out of the country. He must be ruffling feathers within the royal family, and with that come dangers as well.
I think he's certainly racking the enemies within the kingdom, and certainly those who've been, centers of power within the kingdom. Look at the last crown prince he got rid of. If you all remember, he was the crown prince or deputy crown prince. Now he's become a crown prince, and got rid of a man who's been heading security in Saudi Arabia, in charge of the campaign against terror, a very close friend of the United States. Look at the new man he just got rid of, Mit'ab bin Abdullah, who's the head of the National Guard. His father, former King Abdullah, before he became king, he was also head of the National Guard. So since its establishment in 1962, the National Guard has been headed by Abdullah and his son. Now, the new crown prince just put all of that aside and is doing his own new assignment. So he's really changing things around, but not only within the kingdom. So right before he made his major first changes in order to become crown prince, he launched the war in Yemen when he was defense minister. So in all, while he's making major shifts and dramatic shifts within the kingdom, he's also making them within the region.
And of course that leads us neatly to the next question, which is this attack apparently against Saudi Arabia, missiles being launched from Yemen's territory. This is a wake-up call, is it not, for Riyadh about their whole policy in Yemen, and which way do they go now?
Today we saw this new dramatic change in what I would like to call, or what even they're calling, a new balance of terror between the Saudis and the Houthis, whereby the Houthis are able to shoot ballistic missiles not only that goes 1,000 kilometers towards Mecca, but also more than that, longer than that, towards Riyadh, towards the King Khalid airport around Riyadh. So really, the capacity of the Houthis, a renegade or, if you will, a rebel group in Yemen, able to do that kind of action, to take that kind of step against Saudi Arabia, is a proof that the Saudis, or the Crown Prince in particular, has made a major fumble in his war in Yemen, and that this is a strategic failure for Saudi Arabia in Yemen.
If that's the case, where Saudi Arabia looking for some semblance of peace within that part of the region, it's all thrown into chaos by the Lebanese Prime Minister, who happens to be in Saudi Arabia and offers his resignation outside of his own country, creating the big question marks about stability in Lebanon and who are the really big game players in a country that's been racked historically with civil war and political strife, and who really are those people in charge of a country that is so close to some of the major conflicts at the moment, especially Syria.
In the end of the day, what we have is Saudi Arabia now is trying to act not only in Yemen, not only in Syria, not only defending itself, but also bringing Lebanon into the whole new theater of proxy conflict and war with Iran. I think that's unfortunate. Why? It's because if the region falls into a proxy conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia, no one is going to win and everyone is going to lose. And I'm not just talking about the Saudis and the Iranians, I'm talking about the Lebanese, the Yemenis, the Iraqis, the Syrians, and so on and so forth. And we've seen the results. Look at Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of casualties. Look at Syria. Hundreds of thousands of casualties. Look at Yemen, tens of thousands of casualties. Lebanon, it had its civil war. Now it might enter to an era of unknown. Why? Because Iran and Saudi Arabia are fighting their proxy wars. While Saudi Arabia is taking the offensive defense, if you will, in Lebanon, Iran is acting in a very cool manner, really expanding its influence on all these regions, and apparently insisting that once Hezbollah finishes its fight in Syria along with Assad and Iran, that it will be taking control within Lebanon. That's not acceptable to the Lebanese represented by Saad al-Hariri and others. And hence Saudi Arabia is taking advantage of that. taking Lebanon into this new theater of proxy conflicts in the region. So all in all, very dangerous for Lebanon, very dangerous for the Eastern Mediterranean, incredibly dangerous for the Arab world. And as we've seen from the shooting of missiles that we've just talked about, it's also dangerous for Saudi Arabia, dangerous for regional security.
Call it a surprise Saturday night shakeup. Saudi state TV reported that 11 princes, 3 current and dozens of former ministers have been detained as part of an anti-corruption probe, only hours after the formation of an investigative committee was announced.
It's difficult to relate this to corruption since they didn't have enough time to make a prosecution or to make investigations about that. If there was something or some information collected previously, why they didn't do it case by case in different periods before that and not doing this overnight, all these people together, which is rather quite suspicious.
The Saudi cabinet overhaul is viewed as a power play by King Salman. Analysts say it's designed to ensure his son and heir to the throne, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, consolidates power and does so among their branch of the royal family.
He's making this public relations stance to get more public support and also to pave the way for his popularity.
One of the most high-profile figures pushed out is the Minister of the National Guard, Prince Mateb bin Abdullah. He was the son of former King Abdullah and once thought to be next in line to the throne. He was the remaining member of the Abdullah family in such a high-level position. Also detained is Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. He's one of the wealthiest men in the world, and given his widespread investments, his detainment could have an impact on global business. The shakeup sends a message. There's a new political order.
All the different branches of the army will be controlled by the same people, eliminating this balance between different branches of the family that there was before. So now there is no way that the transition wouldn't be accepted.
It's also a reminder that 4 months after the Crown Prince was named heir to the throne, there can be no mistake. Mohammed bin Salman is the future for Saudi Arabia. Natasha Ghanem, Al Jazeera.
The streets of Riyadh may still look the same, but this week Saudi Arabia is significantly different than the one the world knew before the weekend. Saudi Arabia has always been an absolute monarchy, but within its political system there was a degree of power sharing between different branches of the royal family, businessmen and religious institutions in order to ensure stability and security. In the early hours of Sunday, however, all of that was destroyed. A royal decree ordered the arrest of several ministers, princes and multi-billionaires. It was seen as the latest step by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in his quest for absolute power.
These kind of moves indicate to us that Mohammed bin Salman is clearing the ground for him to emerge as the undisputed leader, king, absolute king, and he is not capable of tolerating any equal prince. He can only relate to minor princes.
It came less than 5 months after the 32-year-old prince orchestrated a coup against his uncle Mohammed bin Nayef, replacing him as heir apparent. That move followed the much-hailed Riyadh summit with US President Donald Trump. Notably, those detained in this latest crackdown are being held at the same venue where Trump was hosted. Among those arrested on Sunday was Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, a billionaire whose assets include shares in Twitter, Fox News and Apple. One of his companies, Kingdom Holdings, has reported a 10% loss in value since news broke of his arrest. Bin Talal is also the owner of Rotana Media Group, one of the Arab world's most popular media outlets. Detained with him are the heads of other mass media corporations, including NBC Group and ART, all of them arrested by the same royal decree. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince now has a large section of the entire Arab world's media at his disposal. Mohammed bin Salman has spent the past 2 years positioning himself as a visionary willing to transform Saudi Arabia into a modern and liberal state. He's pushed for a review on the ban on women driving cars and has addressed several economic forums in a bid to lure foreign investors. But he's also spent millions of dollars on a devastating war in Yemen that has achieved little aside from an outbreak of cholera and the deaths of thousands of people. Unemployment in Saudi Arabia remains high, which is troubling considering the majority of Saudis are under the age of 35. And according to financial observers, the kingdom's economy is in recession. Bin Salman's policies may be bold and brave as his allies and supporters describe them, but those actions have also been criticized as destabilizing and potentially very destructive. Jamal Al-Shayal, Al Jazeera.
The Saudi government has been very busy lately, and it has foreign leaders and financial chiefs trying to figure out why. On November 4th, King Salman put his heir apparent in charge of a nationwide corruption crackdown. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman then ordered the arrest of numerous prominent Saudis, including relatives such as the billionaire investor Prince Walid bin Talal. They're now being held at the Ritz-Carlton. President Donald Trump applauded the arrests on Twitter, saying the king and the crown prince, quote, know exactly what they're doing. Some of those they are harshly treating have been milking their country for years. Even so, the U.S. is calling on the kingdom to follow Saudi law.
We encourage them, and I just want to say this one more time, to pursue any possible prosecution or corruption cases in a fair and transparent manner.
However, the U.S. says Riyadh did not tell it the arrests were coming. It also says no one expected Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri to resign on the same day. There's speculation the Saudis pressured Hariri to quit in order to send a message to the group Hezbollah and to its supporter Iran, Riyadh's regional rival.
The United States strongly supports the legitimate institutions in the Lebanese state. We expect all members of the international community to respect fully those institutions and the sovereignty and the political independence of Lebanon. We do regard, as you well know, Hezbollah to be a terror organization.
The arrests and the political changes in Lebanon come as bin Salman increases his role in the government. He backs the Saudi-led war against the Houthis in Yemen and the ongoing blockade against Qatar. Some wonder whether all this could ruin the Crown Prince's plans to diversify the oil-based economy. They also wonder if the Trump administration, which, like Saudi Arabia, doesn't like Iran, might be too supportive of bin Salman's actions.
If I was advising the president, I would say maybe this is the time to use some of that influence you've built up with your successful trips to the region, your good friendships, to try and put the brakes on and stop what the Saudis are doing.
As it happens, the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, recently visited Saudi Arabia. White House officials suggested it was to discuss peace efforts between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It would be interesting to know if the Saudis' own foreign policy came up during those same discussions. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.